So, good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Wednesday Women Wellness and Wisdom Workshop. How is that for a mouthful? My name is Jan Bloom. I am from Boca Raton, Florida. I am delighted to be hosting this workshop, and let me tell you why. Because I'm super proud of the Women Wellness and Wisdom movement. I want to share with you what we represent. We represent a group of very dedicated women that are determined. And you know, women are determined to bring health, to bring happiness, to bring inspiration to their communities whenever they can. And this is a vehicle that gives us the opportunity to do that. So what we do each month is we host a workshop, and the workshop is a different topic, and they're dedicated to various women's health issues, everything from cancer to heart disease, to physical health, to hormonal issues. And in today's world, really importantly, we have speakers lined up that will be teaching about emotional health, which I think everybody's going through some crazy emotions these days. But I want you to know I am really super excited to be hosting the workshop with our guest speaker tonight. She is an extraordinary woman. I have so much respect for her, and I know everybody that knows her has tremendous respect on her. She's a sought-after speaker everywhere, and we're so lucky to have her with us. I'm introducing you to Dr. Colleen Andruss, and Dr. Andruss is from St. George, Utah, and that is a very beautiful place. From the pictures I've seen, I've never been there, but gosh, it looks gorgeous. It looks peaceful and just a beautiful, serene place to live. And that's probably why she's so beautiful and relaxed all the time, because of her environment. So I want to tell you a little bit about her background. Dr. Andruss is board certified in internal medicine. She's also boarded in bariatrics. A lot of people don't know what bariatrics is, and it's the study of obesity. And so I wanted to share that with you because that's going to be part of the discussion and workshop tonight. Now, what I think is really cool about Dr. Andruss is that after practicing medicine for several years, in her heart, what she felt was a real void in the medical society regarding obesity. And at that point, and I'm going back 20 years, she was really ahead of herself and decided to open up a healthy lifestyles wellness practice. And so when I think about that, she's truly a forward-thinking, a progressive-minded physician, the kind of physician you want to be going to being your doctor. She's treated thousands and thousands of people for obesity, for eating disorders, hormone dysfunction, and I really love what her core belief is. And her core belief, and you can tell just by looking at that gorgeous picture of her on your screen, her core belief is all about aging gracefully. You all know that term. It's important to age gracefully, but age gracefully through balanced hormones, eating right, and exercising regularly, which I know all of you that are attending this workshop already do. You're just going to learn how to take it to a whole other level. But, you know, for all these reasons, I feel and I believe we are very honored to have Dr. Andruss grace us with her presence, with her knowledge, teaching us the very, very important topic of women and protein. And on that note, Dr. Andruss, I'm going to turn this over to you and disappear from the screen.
All right. First of all, I'm going to disappear from the screen when I actually start my presentation, but I want to thank you, Jan, for that great introduction. I'm very excited to be part of the Women Wellness and Wisdom group. You know, I know that our goal with these monthly presentations is to spread wisdom about wellness issues so that women around the world can, who are tuned into this presentation, can take something either personally for themselves or they can share it with others. And so I love to spread the word and the wisdom and the wellness. And so I'm excited to be here. You know, there are so many topics that we could talk about. I recently came back from the obesity conferences, and the last couple of conferences I've been to, you know, there's been a lot of focus on protein. And so I chose this particular topic because it's really the up and coming, topic. And, we know that metabolic syndrome is running rampant, in our world. And so we know that protein really helps that. So we're going to start here, and I'm going to do that. So protein power is what I titled my topic. And I'm a scientist, I'm a physician, and so there is going to be some science slides on here. I'm hoping that I can present them in a manner that everyone will understand. So bear with me a little bit. I'm, speaking a little bit from a physician's point of view, but again, I want to make sure that we all understand how protein works, why it works, and how we should be using the protein. So if I can get my slide to move here, we'll be in good shape. So protein is essential from head to toe. And I just have some examples of some proteins on this slide here. One of the biggest complaints or issues that I hear so many times from my clients when they come in is I'm so sick of eating chicken, and they say, give me some more ideas for protein. And it becomes very difficult because our resources are somewhat limited. And so we have to become a little bit creative. And I always tell them I can't really create more protein in this world. It is what it is. And so we have to sort of use what we have available. So why do we need protein? Well, every function of our cells, our organs, and our entire body is controlled by proteins. All protein is made within the body from molecules that have ultimately come from foods. So every molecule of protein in the food that you eat is broken down, and it's digested into small units, no matter what kind of protein you have. So why do we need protein in our diet? This is a list of all the things in our body that require protein. Our DNA is protein. That makes our genetic inheritance, our enzymes, which we must have for food absorption and removal, hemoglobin, which carries oxygen, our muscle fibers, our bones, hormones and metabolism, antibodies and immune function, and our hair and our nails. So what happens is we eat protein, it gets digested via digestive enzymes into the bloodstream. It gets digested into amino acids, and these amino acids are absorbed into the bloodstream. They're delivered to wherever they are needed, and then they are used to either make new proteins, or they can be used as a fuel for metabolism. So amino acids basically become the building blocks of our body. And you can see on this slide, I've got a picture of our body with all the different places, and this is only a few of them, that require protein in our diet. So amino acids are the building blocks, and our protein is really sort of our manpower. It's the worker bee. So what's important to understand, and I'll get to this a little bit later, is that we've got to have enough protein to maintain the muscle mass. We've got to have enough protein for fuel. And so we need to have sort of a surplus of protein, because the first thing it's going to be there for is fuel. And then once it gets used as fuel, then whatever's left is going to be used to maintain muscle mass and then eventually build. And so the amount of protein that we need becomes, quite a bit. There are 30,000 to 50,000 proteins in our body. The body does not have the ability to make every single protein, okay? So there are 9 essential amino acids, and essential basically means that these amino acids must be supplied by our diet. So there are 9 amino acids that our body cannot make. It has to come from our diet. And those 9 amino acids are listed on the bottom, just for your information: histidine, isoleucine. Leucine is in bold because we're going to come back to that. Leucine is the one that is absolutely necessary for muscle building and muscle growth. And then the other ones are listed there. So the question that we ask sometimes, are all the proteins equal? You know, we've got chicken and fish, and we've got nuts and you know, legumes, and we've got different protein powders. So are all these proteins equal? Well, we like to rate protein in terms of how complete they are by their amino acid profile. And so if a protein has all of those 9 essential amino acids, it is classified as a complete protein. And that is ranked very high. It is classified as what we call a protein dense or a protein rich food. So animal proteins, we are biologically closer to animals than we are to plants, and therefore animal protein content is more similar to what our own body makes. So the foods that we get from animals and animal products, such as our meat, our fish, our eggs, and our dairy, score very high because the proteins from these sources supply all of those essential amino acids. Plant protein is also a good source of protein. Vegetables are a good source of protein. They have pretty good amino acid profiles, but usually you have to combine these plant proteins with other sources of proteins in order to call them a complete protein, which then gives us all of those 9 essential amino acids that we need for efficient bodily function. Another way that we look at protein is protein concentrate versus isolate. And I'm sure all of you have seen this when looking at different protein powders. So the protein is concentrated by removing the non-protein parts. And that gives you a 70 to 85% pure protein. The remaining is going to be carbs and fats. But if you take that process one step further, you get what's called an isolated protein, and that will give you a 95% pure premium protein with very little of the extra carbs and the fats. So a much purer protein. So remember that a complete protein contains all 9 of those essential amino acids because those are critical for lean muscle mass and other functions in our body. So we're going to talk real briefly about a couple of things here, the different types of protein, and I'll go through this fairly quickly, but I want to talk about the pros and the cons of each. So whey protein, probably one of the most popular. Whey protein is a byproduct in the process of turning cow's milk into cheese, and it is about a 95% protein content. The pros, it promotes lean muscle growth because whey is the highest in that particular amino acid, that essential amino acid called leucine. It promotes fat loss. It supports cardiovascular health. It supports metabolism. It has very quick absorption, which is good if you're going to be using it for post-workout recovery after you've worked out and you want to rebuild that muscle. It gets very quickly absorbed, so it's really good for post-workout. It's inexpensive and it's easily accessible. The downside to whey protein is that the sugar content found in milk and in this process of turning milk into cheese, we get lactose, and lactose is a very common allergen, and so it can make whey somewhat indigestible, and that can lead to flatulence and bloating. There are also a lot of different flavors of whey protein that we can find, but because we have that variety of flavors, we have that because there are a lot of artificial sweeteners and chemicals in there. So without those artificial sweeteners and chemicals, the taste is less than desirable. So whey protein tends to be a little heavily processed, and it degrades the nutritional value somewhat. You can get the unpasteurized whey protein that is pure, but it's expensive and it's harder to find. Casein protein is also comes from milk, as milk goes through a separation process. And like whey, it promotes lean muscle growth, it promotes fat loss, It supports our cardiovascular health and metabolism. The biggest difference between casein and whey is that casein is digested over a longer period of time, which makes it more optimal for a meal replacement. Not necessarily a great thing for a post-workout recovery drink. Some of the downsides to casein are similar in that the sugar, again, the lactose is a common allergen, which can make the casein somewhat indigestible. Again, to make it taste decent, we've got to have a lot of artificial sweeteners and chemicals. Casein is much more expensive compared to whey protein, and it doesn't really work great as a post-workout drink. Again, because it's digested over a longer period of time. To be a good post-workout drink, you want something that's going to be absorbed very quickly, like a whey. Soy protein. Soybeans are hulled and dried into soy flour, and the protein is either concentrated or isolates. So soybeans are one of the very few plant protein sources that actually do offer all of those essential amino acids. So it's classified as a complete protein. It helps to support immune function, bone health, and again, prevent cardiovascular disease. The problem with soy protein is that soybeans are very highly genetically modified because everybody's goal is to produce greater crop yields, and so there's a lot of genetic modification. It does have some potential to influence hormones, but it is also a low cost. The whole hormone issue with soy is very controversial and still being studied, and so it's a lengthy conversation that I'm not gonna get into. But soy protein can be very valuable. Rice protein. Rice protein is from brown rice, and it's become a very standard source of protein powder in the vegetarian world. It has about a 90% protein content. Brown rice is also a good source of complex carbs, vitamin Bs, and fiber. It is hypoallergenic, so it's very tolerable. It's easily digestible, so there's less flatulence than we see sometimes with the whey proteins. It's almost entirely used by the body, and it's not relieved as waste. It doesn't have a lot of artificial sweeteners or additives. The downside to rice protein is that it is plant-based, and it is somewhat deficient in those amino acids, unlike soy. So again, soy protein has all those essential amino acids. Rice protein does not, but rice protein certainly offers a lot of other pros. So then we've got the last type of protein that is commonly used as the hemp protein, derived from the seeds of the cannabis plant. And that only really contains about 50% of the protein compared to rice protein. But hemp protein is classified as a superfood because it has a high number of those essential amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals. It's vegan friendly, it's hypoallergenic. The problem is that it's only harvested in mass quantities in certain countries because of its association with cannabis, and so it's very expensive to use in protein powders. So we've got all these different kinds of proteins, and we've got all these pros and cons. Oh, I forgot pea protein, sorry. Pea protein comes from a split pea, has 80% protein content, very popular choice for vegetarians. Again, hypoallergenic. It is the closest to the whole food source because it has very few additives, and it also is a complete protein containing all of those essential amino acids. So again, we've got all these different proteins, their pros and their cons. So how do we get the best protein out there? Well, the best solution is to combine. Have a combination of all of these different types of proteins. And, in the medical literature, it's called a blended protein. And blended protein basically means it's a combination of all those different types of proteins. By blending all these proteins together, we can fill those potential nutritional gaps that sometimes are seen with a single source protein. It's aspartame-free typically, It's gluten-free, it mixes very easily with water, and it's metabolically more efficient. Now, why is that? It's metabolically more efficient because all the different proteins are absorbed at different rates. And so it's going to keep us metabolically active much longer, and it's going to keep us satisfied much longer between those meals. The Unicity Lean Complete that we use is a blended protein, and blended proteins are somewhat hard to find. I want to just go through these real quick. I just wanted to show you that there is verification of all these studies, and this is a particular study that demonstrates a blended protein, and they actually measured amino acid absorption and protein synthesis, and demonstrated increased protein synthesis and improved muscle mass through this protein blend. Again, same thing, benefits of our blended protein, our higher protein, giving us metabolic advantage and improved body composition. So several studies, have been done in regards to blended proteins. So metabolic advantages of proteins, we can talk about it in terms of athletics, aging, and in weight loss. So thermogenesis, protein increases our metabolic rate because of the way it's absorbed. It improves our body composition because it helps us to maintain our muscle mass. And if we're maintaining our muscle mass, we're going to force the fat off our body if we are in a calorie deficit mode. So if you're in a calorie deficit mode, you're going to lose one of two things. It's going to be either fat or muscle. And so we've got to maintain muscle mass in order to force the fat off our body. If we don't, we're going to lose both muscle and fat at the same time. And you still will lose weight because you're in a calorie deficit mode, but you're going to end up with a smaller version of you. And if you've got fat around your belly, the fat's still going to be around your belly. It's still going to be the bigger part of your body. And so we want body composition to change as we work with people in losing weight. Protein increases satiety because it doesn't turn to sugars. And sugars, as we all know, stimulate insulin. And when insulin levels start to go up and down, it creates a lot of cravings. And there is plenty of studies demonstrating that good lean sources of protein are now reversing the metabolic syndrome by lowering triglycerides and increasing HDL, lowering glucose and lowering insulin levels after we eat, lowering blood pressure. Metabolic syndrome is the most common disease now in America. So the protein is critical, but you know what? Glucose is also very critical because glucose provides fuel. So every part of our body needs glucose, our brain, our cells, our kidneys. We produce glucose in our liver at a rate of about 2 to 8 grams per hour. But what a lot of people don't realize is glucose is not an essential nutrient because our body really makes all the glucose that we need in the liver, and it makes it only if we have adequate protein. So the production of glucose, we don't need glucose from the outside world. Our body can make glucose in the liver. It can make all the glucose we need for fuel as long as we have protein to make that. So how much do we need? The minimum requirement is 0.8 grams per kilogram, about 55 to 65 grams a day. That runs about 15% of our calories. Now, what that means is that is the minimum to prevent deficiency or muscle breakdown, and to prevent the muscle being broken down and using for energy. So that obviously is not optimum. So to be optimum and to really get the most efficiency from the protein that we eat, and to optimize our health outcomes, meaning to maintain muscle mass and change body composition and improve thermogenesis and all our metabolic regulations, we need at least 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram, which is 95 to 140 grams per day. That makes up about 30% of our calories for the day. So the Obesity Association back last fall sort of came out with a statement, because these numbers get kind of complicated for the lay public. So they basically sort of made a statement and said, you know, minimum, on the average person, the minimum protein that is needed to maintain muscle mass and force fat off the body is 90 grams of protein per day. So it's been an easy number to kind of remember. But then people ask, well, is that safe, and how much really can we have? Studies show that we can have up to about 3 grams per kilogram, which is about 225 grams. So, you know, when we're promoting protein in people, we need to understand that it is okay, because you're going to have a lot of people who are going to look at you and say, wow, that's a lot of protein. Is that really safe for my kidneys? Are my kidneys going to survive? And they are, okay? Actually, protein increases the efficacy or the filtration rate of our kidneys, and it promotes clearance of the protein waste products called urea. And this, with more protein, our kidneys actually become more efficient. So in a healthy individual, we can have pretty high contents of protein. But if the kidneys are already compromised somewhat, then you do have to be a little bit more careful. Protein is also necessary for bone, and this issue is a little bit more complex. We must have protein in the bone, but if we have too much protein, it can actually increase calcium loss in the bone and therefore promote bone loss. But again, the levels, you know, that are too much we're talking 300 grams per day. And, you know, the only people that really get over that 250 grams per day are big bodybuilders. This is just a study I wanted to show. Type 2 diabetics, you know, we typically think of diabetics having kidney function that is compromised, but this was a study that was done in type 2 diabetics. And they consumed a diet of 90 to 120 grams of protein, and it had no effect on kidney function compared with those who ate 55 to 60. So it is safe for our kidneys if we are, you know, typically healthy adults. So despite the focus on our protein needs and how much protein we need, that 90 grams minimum, it is still important that we have the balance of our nutrients, because in every single metabolic cell of our body, this particular chemical equation is there. This is metabolism. This is what produces energy in our body. And this chemical reaction is nutrients plus oxygen plus water equals energy. The nutrients that we have are the carbs, the proteins, and the fats. The carbs are the initial source of fuel. So we've got to have some carbs. Proteins will also provide fuel, but their more specific action is to repair muscle and be there for muscle growth. So if we eliminate carbs totally from our diet and all we have in our diet is proteins and some fats, too much of that protein is going to be used for the metabolism and the fuel, and then we're going to end up with not enough for muscle repair and growth. So as much as we focus on protein and you know, it's all about protein and getting that protein in, we still have to have a balance of our nutrients, and we have to have those carbs, because that is the initial source of fuel for our body. If we have adequate calories, if we have adequate carbohydrate intake, the need for protein as a source of fuel is minimized. And therefore, the protein that we take in can be focused on what it really needs to be focusing on, and that is our muscle tissue. This is kind of a complicated slide, but basically it says that we build muscle when muscle synthesis or muscle making of protein synthesis and making of muscle mass is greater than muscle breakdown. So again, if we don't have enough protein there, then we're going to have more breakdown of muscle than we do synthesis, and then we're going to have what we call atrophy. So after resistance exercise, we know from studies that there is a rise in protein synthesis, which is basically the making of muscle mass, and the rate of muscle protein breakdown also increases. So we've got to provide even more of that protein when we're exercising. When we do exercise, studies do show that when we have resistance exercise and aerobic exercise, that the amount of protein is maximized, and the amount of making of new protein and making of muscle mass is significantly increased. In this particular study, they showed that protein synthesis was doubled. So, talked about protein quantity. But now we have to talk a little bit more about the quality real briefly, and then about the meal distribution, because the three things that are important when we look at protein, and the three things that are going to determine how well our protein works, is how much we have, the quality of the protein, and the meal distribution. Those are three major factors. Quality, basically, again, is it must have those essential amino acids, and leucine is the one that is predominantly there for protein synthesis and muscle health. And again, this is getting a little bit complex. I've got two slides that I just want to talk about leucine really quickly. But again, it's so critical in the role of muscle growth to have that leucine in there. And you know, the what's kind of classified as the average or the meal threshold is about 2.5 grams of leucine that we need to consume for the most efficient protein metabolism. Animal proteins have 8 to 11% of the leucine, and plant-based have a little bit lower. So again, animal proteins are a little bit more energy efficient. Up here, I want to just point out two things. So whey isolate, to get our 2.5 grams of leucine, we need 21 grams of protein, which gives us about 85 calories. If we compare that to quinoa, to get 2.5 grams of leucine, we need 42 grams of quinoa protein. And to get 42 grams of quinoa protein, we need about 8 cups of quinoa, which is about 1,100 calories. So when you compare, when we look at what we call protein dense or protein efficient foods, you know, we really want, for fat loss, we want high protein but low calorie. So even though quinoa is a good source of protein, it doesn't even come close to our whey and our soy and our other sources, at least when we're looking at staying in that calorie deficit, mode. Lastly, when we look at protein, we want to look at meal distribution, because lots of studies have shown that balancing the protein distribution throughout the day demonstrates maximum protein synthesis. You know, the old way of thinking was eat 6 small meals a day, keep metabolism revved up. But the newer studies are showing that if we constantly are grazing and snacking throughout the day, that, yeah, we may keep our metabolism revved up a little bit, because remember that food is fuel. But if you are providing fuel all day long, then your body never has to use the fat that you have stored on your body. So the meal distribution that we use now is breakfast, lunch, dinner, no snacks. 3 meals, no snacks. Again, studies, this is, National Institute of Health. I mean, there's lots of major resources with this. How and when our protein is consumed makes a big difference on our body composition and our performance. So 3 meals, no snacks. Those of you who are unicity-based, we know that by the 4-4-12 rule, right? Or in the medical literature, sometimes it's called the 4 to 6 hour rule. So the fat burning starts at about 4 hours. What 4-4-12 really means is is a minimum of 4 hours between meals. But even with a minimum of 4 hours, you're not really entering that fat burning zone. It really should say 4 to 6, 4 to 6, and then 10 to 12, because we want to get to that 6 hours. Our fat burning starts at 4 to 6 hours, and so the longer you can be in that fat burning zone, the better. Now, you may get a little bit hungry as you get closer to that 6 hours, but we want to eat a meal that's big enough at your 3 meals that'll carry you through to the next meal, that'll get that metabolism revved up. And, you know, when you're hungry at 5, 5.5, or 6 hours, what that means is your body's burning calories. It's okay to be hungry. So again, 3 meals, no snacks. Evenly distributing protein across 3 meals, 30 grams minimum per meal will get us that 90 grams minimum per day. Okay, studies have shown that it's more effective at stimulating muscle synthesis than eating the protein throughout the day. So 3 meals, no snacks. The only exception to that rule is if you want to have some protein after you exercise. That protein, if you do a whey protein right after your exercise, that's going to get absorbed very quickly. The muscle at that point is the most sensitive to nutrient intake, and you're going to boost that muscle protein synthesis and recovery by having a little bit of that whey protein afterwards. And that will not affect, if it's just a small amount, a serving, it should not really affect that 3 meals, no snacks rule very much. You're going to be burning that right away. So my little cartoon down here, my life is just periods of waiting until I can eat my next meal. She's suffering a little bit there. So again, we want to stay in that fat burning zone. We want to tap into those fat burning zones, 4, 4, 12. But we still got to stay in that calorie deficit mode. So calories in, calories out, we're going to maintain weight. Energy in, energy out, we're going to maintain weight. To lose weight, we need to be in a negative caloric balance, so our energy in has to be less than our energy out. If we're in a negative calorie balance, by either taking in less or exercising more, you're going to lose weight. Now, weight is going to be either fat or muscle. If you don't want to lose muscle, you've got to have a minimum of 90 grams of protein a day, split between 3 meals, a minimum of 30 grams of protein per meal. This just kind of depicts the same thing. Some people are going to ask, can protein cause weight gain? When protein supplements and protein causes weight gain, it's because we're eating proteins that also have a high carb content or are highly processed, making it more calorie dense. So when we're not using isolate proteins, which are more pure, we've got more carbs and fats. And if we're using things like quinoa to supply us with 30 grams of protein, we're going to be taking in lots of calories. So again, we want to stick with what we call protein-dense foods in order to keep that content low. So I think this is one of my final slides. So basically, protein planning for fat loss. The first meal of the day is critical for muscle response. That is what's going to get that metabolism revved up. That's what's going to get that chemical reaction started that produces energy. 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram, which is about 100 to 140 grams per day, to optimize muscle protection and stimulate metabolism. And it should be done in equal distribution to force the body to use the body's stores of fat in between those meals. So we're focusing on a minimum of 30 grams of protein per meal. We want to try to use our higher quality proteins if we can get 2.5 grams or more of leucine. And we want to make sure that the protein, if we're using protein supplements, we want to make sure that it is a blended protein because of the metabolic efficiency that a blended protein has, because all those proteins, remember, are being absorbed at different rates, and it will keep you metabolically active longer. Also, to be a good protein blend, it should have 90% or more of the nutrient value. There are a lot of good protein powders out there, protein supplements, but if you look at their nutrient value, many of them only have 25 to 40% of the nutrient value. We want to emphasize high fiber vegetables and berries. Do not blend them in your protein powders. They become pure sugar. We eat them on the side so that we go through a longer digestive process, which then slows down how much insulin our body puts out. We need carbs. Okay, we need some carbs, but they need to be the whole grains. They need to be the higher fiber carbs, the complex carbs that are going to turn to sugar slower, again, to keep insulin levels down. If we don't have carbohydrates in our diet, our body will use that protein for fuel, and then we're going to not have enough there for the maintenance of our muscle mass. Obviously, the more we exercise, the higher the carbs can be. But in a sedentary person, you don't want more than about 40 grams per meal. And the easiest way to remember is to try to maintain a protein carb ratio of 1 to 1. It can be a little higher if we're exercising, a little bit lower if in a real heavy, very, very sedentary person. They may not even be able to tolerate 25 to 30 grams per meal. And then just remember that our resistance exercise enhances our protein benefits in our muscle. So the best protein out there is, again, our blended protein. And, you can't really get much better than, I'm going to make a plug here for our Unicity Lean Complete because it has greater than 90% of the nutrient value. It's pure protein. It's blended protein. It's got, I think, 6 different vegetable proteins. It's got soy, whey, casein, milk. And its calorie content's low, its carbs are low, its fat's low. We do have the vegan brand as well. That does not give 100% nutrient value, obviously for the reasons that we've already discussed. It is mostly your vegetable proteins. And then we've got, obviously, the chocolate ones. So in our Get Fit 21 program, whether you're doing the Get Fit 21 program or the transformation program, or you're just utilizing these products in your home or with your friends or family or clients or whatever, the Get Fit 21 program focuses on the use of this particular protein. And, it is it's really been a fun, fantastic tool for many people to use, to have accountability, to get people to utilize a good source of protein and really get some fat loss going. So I think that's the last of my slides.
Wow. Dr. Andruss, I don't feel like we just had a workshop. I feel like we just all attended a semester protein. That was outstanding. And oh my gosh, I took notes and I can't wait to go back and read my notes, but I can tell you, I like to memorize certain things, and what's going to always ring in my head is nutrients plus oxygen plus water equals energy.
Yep.
That's what I'm going to always think about when I'm preparing my meals. And that will help me always remember the proper balance of different things as I'm eating throughout the day. But, if you don't mind, I'd like to let you know that we have a few questions that we'd like to run by you, if you don't mind spending a few more minutes with us.
No, that's fine.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, there's one question here. It says, all the bodybuilders say that you have to consume your protein within 30 minutes after a weightlifting session. What happens if you wait an hour? And that was the first question.
Okay. Well, everybody's metabolism is a little bit different. But again, as I think I stated even a little bit in here is if you've got a protein supplement that is absorbed very quickly, like that whey protein is usually absorbed within an hour, the sooner you get it in, the better. So typically an hour or less, but the sooner you get it in, the better you're going to repair those muscles, the quicker you're going to get that muscle repair going. So I don't know that there's a huge difference between 30 minutes and an hour, but you got to get it within that first hour, and sooner the better, because those muscles are fatigued, and they're torn, and they've been overworked, and we don't want to be using our muscle as a source of energy if we can help it. So the sooner you can supply the muscle back with energy that's been utilized during that workout, the safer and the better you're going to be.
Okay. Next question was, how do you counsel vegan patients to get enough protein?
It's a great question. I struggle with this every day. It is very hard. And, you have to end up using a lot of protein supplements in these people. I'll even have people who are vegetarians, vegans. They don't even want eggs. They don't want fish, but they don't want dairy. Dairy is now becoming kind of an issue, and dairy provides us with a lot of good protein. But, if somebody's got some lactose intolerance and they can't do dairy, then we're really stuck. So I end up using, really promoting a lot of protein supplements, but that's where our balanced our blended proteins really come into play, because you can basically take a blended protein and you can eat that every single day for the rest of your life. Okay, if it has greater than 90% of the nutrient value, and feel 100% comfortable that you are getting all the nutrients that you need. So, I just explained to them, I cannot create more protein in this world, and it is what it is, and these are our choices. And so we have to work with what we have. And, I can't change the physiology of how our body works. I can't change that. Our body needs that protein. So I just really try to make them understand how important that protein really is.
Okay. The next question was, for individuals that have one kidney, how much protein is safe?
Very good question. I've come across this as well. Again, it depends upon their kidney function. There are people who are born with one kidney, and the second kidney is sufficient to provide all of the requirements that the person needs. It compensates very, very nicely. So if there is one kidney, I would highly recommend that you know what that kidney function is, or that you talk to the kidney specialist or their primary care physician, because you're going to want to know that their kidney function is fine. If their kidney function is fine, then they're going to be able to tolerate that 90 grams minimum. But, as a person gets a little bit older, if they have one kidney, then typically their filtration rate of the kidney is compromised a little bit. And so I would say in my clients who have one kidney, probably 50 to 60% of them have compromised function. And in discussions with their kidney specialist, we typically keep them at about 55 to 60 grams of protein. And that is doable for them.
Okie doke. The next is somebody stating that they have a male client who's 50 pounds overweight. His job involves physical exercise all day long. He starts his day at 7 a.m. with a shake, and so he is eating a snack. He's doing 4-4-4-12. And this individual felt like the manual labor that he's doing all day long should qualify him to eat 4 meals. How do you feel about that?
So how much time is in between those meals? Like, is he up really early?
Well, 7 a.m. is when he starts his day.
He starts his day. Okay. There are going to be plenty of people, and I see this also on a regular basis, where, and probably what I see more commonly is the person who gets up at 9 or 10 o'clock. How are they going to get 3 meals in and have 6 hours in between without any beating at, midnight? So there may be some times when, for this individual's purpose, if he eats his first meal at 7, maybe he does eat at 10, but then he might have one period of time where it's only 4 hours, but then he should try to get the rest of them closer to 6 hours. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Sense to me, so it must make sense to the person that's asked. So a couple other questions. If you cannot have whey protein, no dairy, no egg, then what substitute after exercise would be recommended?
Probably that's hard because your vegetable proteins are absorbed quicker as well, like your whey protein. Your rice protein has probably the most complete, so I would probably go with the rice. I don't know that for sure, but I'm just basing it on having the complete essential amino acids, how complete it is, how good it is, and how quickly it's absorbed. I would probably do a rice blended protein, like a rice milk or something.
Okay. And the final question is interesting. It says, I heard that you need a little glucose to shuttle the protein into the system. Having a shake that includes a little fruit after a workout, is that okay?
Well, you don't need glucose. You do need glucose to shuttle, but our body makes its own glucose, so you really don't have to have it from the outside. But again, we want to have those carbs, because if we don't have the carbs, then our body's going to have to use some of that protein as a source of fuel. So the carbs are the initial fuel source, and so without the carb, without that glucose to provide that fuel, our body it'll get to the protein first, and then we may end up lacking in protein for use with muscle mass and muscle metabolism. Okay. So yes, I agree that in a person who's working out a lot, they're going to be utilizing that energy equation is going to be going much faster. And so certainly having some fruit, but not blended, just having it, eating it on the side of that protein drink.
Interesting. Okay. You just changed the way that I'm going to be blending my fruit, my shake. So I want to say to you that it was, I can't tell you how much of a pleasure it was to share this hour with you.
Thank you.
I want you to know from the bottom of all of our hearts that joined you within this workshop, we're honored to have you in our presence.
Thank you.
And I want to let everybody know that we have a very exciting lineup for the rest of this year and into the first quarter of next year. We talked about the importance of protein tonight with Dr. Andruss, and we have all the other interesting topics lined up. And I wanted to just give you a heads up that next month we're going to be hearing from Dr. Karen Hordovenko. She's going to be speaking on the power of the mind in obtaining good health. And so as you attend these workshops and you assimilate all of this information, just think how healthy you're going to become and how many other women that you care about, how many other women you can be helping. So Dr. Andruss, I want to thank you for being part of the Women, Wellness, and Wisdom movement.
You bet. I love it.
And we're moving in the right, healthy direction. Thank you for sharing the information on the very best option for acquiring protein in addition to our foods and our program, Get Fit 21. I really appreciate that you gave a plug for that because it was important and we're grateful. So on that,
thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for attending. It was a wonderful workshop. See you next month.
Thank you.